This Chinese looking board game has the weirdest round resolution out of any board game I've played. Like, look at this thing here. This entire thing is 1 year, and you play only 2 years for the fast game. Oh, and no, that doesn't mean this is a fast game. This is a big game. So let's strap in for Realm of Sword and Snow. This is a game that's kind of like Game of Thrones in ancient China, where winter is coming. Okay, sure, it doesn't look like China, and it doesn't actually claim to be it, but come on, it's basically the OG Three Kingdoms, aka Dynasty Warrior styled world. You know, the one that's in every single OG Chinese soap opera? Anyways, in this fictional China, the emperor was buried. But there was an issue when he was buried because the tomb did not name a successor. Therefore, the 4 bratty princes of this world are starting to battle each other for the throne. Okay, pretty straightforward. However, in the land of Zhu, a terrifying creature without a soul emerges and threatens to envelop the land. Unless the 4 princes can temper that threat together. Or maybe one or multiple princes will help the undead take the capital? That's the game story. You're one of the 4 princes/princesses, leading your armies to try to be the most divine to be crowned as the next emperor, with the undead threat being a prevalent problem for all. Gameplay can be described as area control Ameritrash, where you control your prince and troops to move around the board to complete objectives, play cards to fight, and fight against or sometimes for the undead. And this is all via a year track that has so many phases. Gosh, such weird round resolution. In fact, not only do the undead and their generals remind me of the threat beyond the wall from Game of Thrones 2nd edition, but the sequence fights with an allying every year and betrayal cards reminds me a lot of Rising Sun. But Sword and Snow is a lot more of what I wanted out of Rising Sun. Gah, I mean, I guess in short, let's just say it combines a lot of these popular area controls and Ameritrash games. This is a big one, folks. For this review, we have a prototype, and we'll be covering the faster version of the game that is only 2 years as opposed to 3 full years. But it's still long, at a projected 45 minutes per player that we found to be kind of true at about 4 to 5 hours at our 3 and 4 player games. And yes, this is a sponsored review for a game that's not out yet, so if that sort of thing bothers you, now you know. But we try to be as critical and as objective as possible in our reviews of these games, but again, hey, that's really hard for us to do, right? But we're trying. Anyways, let's get now to our longest ever how to play. Here we go. The goal of the game is to have the most divine points after a certain amount of years, which are kind of like rounds in this game that are split into 4 seasons that all function a bit differently. There's a bunch of ways to get points, including winning combats with troops on the board, holding cities at the end of a year, killing the neutral undead, completing your secret objective dealt at the beginning of the game, and you can even get new objectives at some point. Also, there's morale, which is where players will rank in relation to each other, usually helping you win tiebreaks. Even the neutral undead have their own space here. Actually, yeah, that's a big part of the game, the undead. See, these are big bads whose goal is to take the capital. And if there's ever more than 9 of these there at the end of the game, a bad ending will trigger, which will completely change point scoring. These will spawn every round randomly on the board, and more can spawn the higher this corruption track goes up, which gets filled up with players spending a soul gem OP resource that they can use to pay for anything. Oh, also, anytime a unit dies on the board, it becomes a zombie. So yeah, players gotta be careful about zombies, unless they want to trigger the bad ending, ha 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 ha. Okay, back to the seasons. So in spring, you can first upgrade your chi limits on your character board. Chi is used to play for cards, mostly during combat. Then you enter liquor, which is selecting which element you currently just cap out on. And then it'll be -1 cost to use that color for the round. And this is where alliances are made. Yep, if you choose the same color as someone else, you're an ally for the round, which we'll explain in a bit. Then you harvest, where the majority strength player at each region, indicated by having more of the sword icon, gets the harvest reward. Now it's onto summer, which is a big part of the game. Everyone will take a turn in each action phase, meaning you can take 2 of any of these actions, you can repeat them too. You can move figures 1 thing each, or 2 things once. Or tax, taking 1 of these options. Or meditate, which you can get 3 chi from any of these colors. You can build, where cities grant points for building and holding them, or you can build a tower, which are immovable units. You can recruit, where you can recruit up to 3 army dudes where you're at or adjacent to you. Lastly is hunt, where you can kill an undead where you're at, then displace some based off how strong you are there. Oh, FYI, you can also trade with other players on your turn, as in you can trade anything in this game, including chi, troops, and even points. Once everyone has taken their turn, the first player gets to choose a decree bonus for both them and their ally to share. Yeah, that's a lot of different things, so we'll just move on to the next action phase, where you get to do summer again with a new first player. After that, you'll hit this tribute icon where everyone gets to choose an exploration reward at places they're at, starting with the most power to the least power. You'll do another 2 turns for our abridged gameplay here, and then it's time for autumn, where it's time for war. You'll basically just find each region if possible. Remember, if you're allied with someone, you don't fight them. We'll explain this more after we mention winter, where everyone has to worry about the undead and are temporarily teamed up against them for this entire phase. First, every troop must eat 1 food. If not, they'll die and become zombies, and you'll lose morale. Then the undead rise, where you roll a d12 based on this necromancer track, and then spawn bad guys at the area of the die result. Then it's time for the prey phase, where the highest morale player plays their special prey card due to the benefit. Now we get onto the war phase to fight, where you'll do combat against undead. Again, we'll explain fighting in a sec. Any undead that remain, like if they want to fight, get to move, where if there's more than 5 on a space, half of them move generally south. And if they have the majority in the new area they move into, they just kill all player figures. Yeah, those also become zombies. This means that a huge horde can just sweep south. The very last part of the round is winter scoring, where players get points for cities they own. Okay, now let's get to combat. So everyone involved in the fight must first declare up to 3 cards from their hand to use. Then highest morale to then least morale will call for reinforcements from adjacent places. To fight, players are just adding onto their unit strength by playing cards one at a time from their hand. Relics can also be equipped as a card play, or they can already be on the units. As a card outside these 3 you declared, players can also play Betray, even if they're not in an alliance. So if you're in an alliance, you do the bottom and move down to morale in some way. Finally, when both players decide not to play any cards or can't, whoever has the highest strength wins, gets points for things that die, and the loser of the fight gets back 1 card to their hand. Every single other card is discarded. Oh yeah, winners of any fight move up in morale. And remember, everything that dies becomes a zombie. Ooh. When you're fighting against the undead in winter, you can use the same combat rules. It's just that the undead don't play cards from hand. They just don't do anything except if there's an undead general, which can have a special ability depending on what type you started the game with. That is the bare bones of this very phase-laden game. We'll be explaining more in the pros. Let's start with component pros. Now let me tell you guys, there's a lot of cool minis and games, but they did something special with all these prototype minis here. Because there are practically no mold lines on any of the minis. Like, there is so much detail, it's incredible. Look at this undead general holding some screaming guy, or the detail on this tower.
Unbelievable? On the doors to the tower, there's like a finely carved pattern that is replicated on each door, but it's extremely tiny. We're talking like millimeters.
Or the undead shoulder armor is the same as the normal units, because normal units turn into undead. And the princes all have memorable and exciting poses, so you can easily tell them apart at a glance and are memorable. Every mini, including the chunky big towers, was painted and then washed in a darker shade, which just makes them pop from afar. Also, it very clearly differentiates blue from the lighter blue undead. But RIP to Grey Prince that we dropped him, our fault though. And there's these nice orange flags to mark which regions had combat, which is very useful, and are textured to look like they're actually moving in the wind. And there's these solid wooden tokens for your player, which are engraved differently. Woohoo! Resources all have a unique make. Like, they got actual stones for ore, pet feed looking pellets that are like cork for the wood, and the money is an actual tail. Oh, holy cow, they did this! The minor resources of chi and food also go up and down on their own track, which is easy to look at. These are constantly moving. The board of the world is visually well designed, as you can see everything from afar easily with different variations of shapes and colors. Also, almost everything in this game can quickly be identified on the board, so you rarely need to take your eyes off of it. Like, the way they did the year moving up is extremely useful because this game has so many darn phases. There's also plenty of art on the combat cards with their different colors, and then you have the advisors to your prince, although some proportions here are looking a tad wacky, but hey, it's good enough, and the way they do slot into your chi board is good. Now it's time for gameplay pros, and we have to talk about the evil undead. The idea of bringing your NPC neutral faction to an area control is a great idea here. See, we didn't explain this tragic ending fully yet, but everyone loses half of their VP, and then you start getting penalized for stuff you normally get points for, like sitting soul gems, resources, or even chi unlock. Then vengeance tokens, which are normally kind of a get back in the game reward from your prince dying, they now become a positive 7 points, which is a lot because it's after having everyone's points occurs. So what does this mean for your nefarious plans while playing the game? Well, if you're not winning in the traditional way, well, then you can just go ahead and join the dark side. But you often want to do this a little bit more subtly too, because you wouldn't want to have others accuse you of tanking the game and not want to work with you anymore. Plus, you want to time your tank well, because if you don't, well then the other humans will just get rid of the undead. And then you actually get 1 point for every single undead you kill, so you could be feeding them a lot of points if you don't do that well. You don't want to spawn a manageable amount of zombies for your opponents to farm. There's also the Purge Decree action. That is, if you're the first player for that summer rotation, you can end the round by purging, which nukes zombies in every single location on the board where there are units, giving the points to the Purger and their ally. So you don't want to feed that, and everyone is playing around this decree. There are so many ways to manipulate the undead army. Like, you can do the baseline of hunting as an action, which kills 1, then moves 2 for each strength you have. So you can either do this to push them away from the capital, or plop it over to your opponents to bother them. Or you can intentionally die to the undead, because remember, all units become undead after death. So you can hunt to move guys over to your big army, say you're gonna handle it, and when it's your time to fight them, you refuse to strengthen that force. Whoopee, they're all zombies. You want to set up a zombie cascade, because if there's 5 or more in a space at end of year, they'll just move again. The zombies are also interplayed really well with this Tragedy of the Commons soul gem gameplay. See these soul gems? They're amazing. They're like plastic crack in this game, because when you spend them, they can pay for all the costs of something. So really good. Problem is, you have to put it down on this area here. As this fills up, We'll have more zombies spawning every round. And then every time you move from one of the tiers to the next, you spawn an undead general on the board. There is just an incredible temptation to use the soul gems because they'll straight up give you points, like building a city, and then you'll get a soul gem as a reward. So you can just build another city. The problem is that getting points doesn't matter too much if you get it halved by the evil ending. You can even have people negotiating with each other not to use soul gems to prevent the bad ending. Or someone can just dump a lot at some point, especially since if it gets to the end of the track, you get punished for using soul gems. And soul gems are negative points if there's a bad ending. So sometimes you just sell before it's too late. Tragedy of the commons, baby. This culminates into really dynamic gameplay motivations as you have one player trying to win normally, then you have someone else trying to tank the game in favor of the zombies, and then the other players are probably straddling in the middle of deciding which side they should go for, good or evil. All of these pushing ideas just really help the negotiation flow. Like imagine being someone else's gardener, just cleaning up an undead mess with skill cards fueled by resources from the capital who are pushing for the good ending, and the capital can trade a lot of resources out. Actually, since killing the undead grants you points, you can always intentionally shoot up the corruption track to be this undead hunter to slay all of them. This means that there's just more ways to score as the corruption track increases, bringing up losing players back. And it's also really thematic how the board state can be a climax endgame with the world filled with battles against the undead. And this opens up a lot of opportunity for the betrayal card. Because say you slay the one prince who's fighting against the undead with said betrayal card, then that prince and his army become undead, and then the zombies just swarm the capital. And I'm not sure what category this falls under, but it's hilarious how you can blackmail other players in giving them food. Because everyone needs food at the end of the round to feed their troops. If you don't get the food, well, your troops starve, and then they become zombies, and then you lose morale. So yeah, if you control the food in this game, you can negotiate like that. And the undead generals can be different, which adds more replayability on how you approach the undead. In one game, they might feel like a slightly buffed unit, and so the undead are weak, meaning the game won't really turn into a bad ending unless players actively help the undead. Other times, Undead General is a terrifying god who can devoid his location of actions and cannot be killed without using frost to some extent during combat. So you gotta work together more in this game for a shot at a normal end. Whew, okay, so that was the undead mechanic. Now let's talk about the combat system, which takes about half the game. Reminder, you can declare up to 3 cards to fight, and then you ask for reinforcements. The way the reinforcements are handled in this game are great, because players can enter from adjacent regions, which not only keeps things interconnected, but it's also fun for negotiation because you can split the rewards of winning a fight. But also because there's effectively 2 combats around each region, one for autumn and then one for winter, you can decide to do reinforcements based off how you think other fights will go, and then reinforce the move again in winter. This is some incredible big brain predicting of everyone's intentions, because remember, everyone is fighting or supporting the zombies in slightly different ways. Okay, now back to the combat. So when you declare cards, the combat cards have some really fun varied ways to change up combat. There is a standard adding of more strength, or you can move units into the combat, or delete enemy units before they even fight, or just get more chi to play later cards. Some cards ask for soul gems as a cost. You know, the evil soul gems that increase the zombie track? Here's more, killing zombies mid-winter combat, which seems like you're just thinning the herd until you realize that this gets you VP before you resolve combat resolution. And thus you can steal away kills from your enemies that are allies during winter. Or you play this and just kill all the zombies. Or this one, you just cancel another person's card. Or this one, you can make the winners of the fight not really winners anymore, rather the winner loses 5 victory points. So now people are trying to lose the fight. Or you can move units away from the fight so you can effectively reinforce, then play this. Now you're in a whole nother region, so you can reinforce somewhere else again. You just moved 4 spaces. Oh, and when you lose a fight, you get to take one of your cards from your cooldown and put it back into your hand. So yeah, sometimes you're just fighting to get cards back. And when you win a fight, you go up in morality. So the game is balanced around wanting to never give up too many fights, even if you're okay with them getting that VP. You know what cards people have too, because it's totally public what cards are bought. Where players will be playing the same combat cards again and again throughout the game, you just have to keep track of their chi to see what they can play. And while not a declared card during combat, the Betray card is still a good implementation. First, it's cool how much incentive there is to play it, because you move your marker to a new liquor space, which fills your chi to really change up the combat cards you can play. Then yes, there is a morality and VP loss downside, but taking your morality can be good if you want to lose fights. Think about trying to have lower morality than the undead to lose to them in tie breaks. Then amongst allies, Betray can kind of be like a game of chicken during every fight they're both participating in. Since if they want to betray, well, the highest morality goes first during combat. They have the most to lose from moving to the bottom morality. Then the second morality still might not betray, because even if they go positive off of winning combat, even with a negative VP for betraying, they still have to worry about triggering future fights. Look, there's 12 regions. So yeah, there's 12 regions, which you fight in each of 2 different ways every single year. so the amount of plays and upsets you can do during combat is pretty big. Of course, as long as you have enough troops on the board and enough chi to play for cards in hand. Oh, and thank goodness that these towers can never move, so it's a good balance between adding a new type of unit, but also not making it too confusing because, you know, less movement. Like, we're not going to talk about every region's uniqueness, but the 2 landlocked regions are very important because they can reinforce into almost every single other region on the board. So you can plop a big army here, and you'll have quite a bit of options until that region is called to fight upon. There's a nice trade-off here where the later number 1, which gives you more time to use it, is touching one less region than the other one. Now for the next gameplay pro umbrella is that there's a good diversity of strategy options you can employ, which again, get combined with the very loose amount of negotiation you can have. Remember, you can trade relics, troops here, or even points. Okay, so the first diversity of strategy is the secret objectives dealt out from the beginning, and they all require the player to hold 2 regions at the game end, encouraging an area control type of approach for some initial posturing. But some of the red secret objectives in Zoo, the north area can explore to get these cards, totally change the game. For example, one lets you become the right-hand disciple of Zoo as the chief necromancer, where you can choose to play it to reveal your true form, and now you pilot the undead forces directly. Yeah, it's like playing Battlestar Galactica. Alternatively, you can just feed your prince to die as quickly as possible to get 15 points per vengeance token. Or another, this requires your temporary ally to win the game. If they do, you get 50 points, which would probably make you win. There's one that makes you a superhero where you max out every single chi stat, also getting you possibly 36 points endgame from unlocking them fully, and now you're juiced to fight constantly. Basically, the emergent alignment cards can radically change the genre of the game you're playing. Like, come on, you're basically becoming a full-fledged villain with Necromancer. The second way of pursuing points is the straightforward ones of holding cities, aka area control, or winning combats. Then you can lastly kill zombies, as we said. Okay, so let me write this down, okay? So you win combats in summer, which can help you kill zombies in winter. Then you hold cities. But you don't have to win combats in summer to do the rest. Like, you can kill zombies in summer or winter if you move around. Then you can hold cities by retreating during combat, so you don't even have to win combat. And this is all flanked by the emergent alignment cards, which can provide who knows what. Moving on to gameplay pros, we want to praise how the seasons of a year just play off each other really well. Each season of play really has its own feeling to evoke said season. Like how spring results in a ton of resources flooding with the harvest and liquor, and then you're making new alliances with the new year with liquor. Then summer is where everyone is spending a lot of time outdoors, so a lot gets done with moving around and building stuff. And then people don't really care about zombies, so it's only 1 point for every 5 killed in this phase. And then in autumn, everyone becomes enemies to try to get glory before the year end. And in winter, people realize they screw up and the undead enjoy the cold, so yeah, oops, try to ally against them. This accelerates every year into a lot of VP at the end, making not only the end of the game climactic, but also the end of every round, which is a nice payoff for how much you've been posturing so far. Oh, and last thing on progression, there's this undead general spawn when someone gets to 44 VP, which feels really well placed to keep the zombie tension high as the game barrels into mid-game. So now it's replayability pros, and if it wasn't clear from all the cards in this game, to the objectives, to your combat cards, yeah, there's a lot of value here. We can bring some attention to the relics, these equipables. And there's not only just strength bonuses, but you can kill zombies upon moving, you can revive your prince, man, the list just keeps going on. Or how there's advisors, which are essentially like your character's asymmetry, where you draw 2 and pick one early game. They not only change your starting location, but can modify your strategies. Like one I had made it feasible to nuke my own towers for a benefit, and building towers really scared other people because they would nuke upon defeat. Then another advisor helped me harvest better, so I should probably hold more cities to take advantage of that. If you're really serious about asymmetry, there's even the advanced variant to have each player have 4 more abilities, with a couple of them being once per games. But yeah, we didn't try this because the game already has so much going on. Oh, and by the way, the game also surprisingly plays well at 3 players, which isn't necessarily the case for area controls, and that's because a neutral faction really helps add more drama onto the board. There's so much movement possible during summer, autumn, and winter that even with a 4-player map, the 3 players still feels conflict heavy. And we even think the game plays better at 3-2 because there's less downtime. The final pro is that this game is just a really fleshed out fictional Chinese world for you and your friends to have a compelling, violent story. Like, it's just so easy to come up with these dramatic moments. Maybe sometimes the undead are the most honorable in the land, and we just fear them too much as they have the mandate of heaven, so they win all time. Maybe it's a good idea to ally with them and destroy the remnants of the old regime that your dad had. Or there could be a buildup of defenders in the southern capital holding out against the undead and a now evil prince. Or you can find a magical relic on the Thousand Sword Coast that will continually revive your leader over and over again like a phoenix. You can mix that with this movement step card to retreat and rise one more time, more vengeance tokens. And then how the siblings will all be bickering with each other, and then they'll be begrudgingly allying with each other as they drink wine. And then at the end of the year when it's really cold, oh shoot, there's zombies. Okay, let's all work together to to fight against them now, okay? And if the zombies haven't taken the capital, then you go back to bickering again. Cons! Component cons time. And we gotta start with the really unclear rulebook, which had so much ambiguity and we had to keep asking the designers what's up. I know that English isn't the design team's first language, but yeah, let me just read some of these, okay? Which one I wrote down? It was, okay. Lose battle. Get 1 card from cooldown. Then high strength may split the battle rewards with ally. This is trying to say that the winner of the fight with the highest strength may choose to split the rewards, but they don't have to. Okay, no kidding. Let me just turn to 2 random ones and just read how weird it is. End of the year. Refresh all player prey card. Must only have 1. What? I think they're trying to say anyone that played a prey card just puts it back in their hand. We get it. The game is huge, but come on. There needs to be a better work here. It's not even spell checked in some areas. Because there's so many different phases with 2 different combat phases, rules can kind of mix up in your head. Like, why do battle scoring rewards work differently for fall and winter? When do we get cards back into our hands? The rulebook just really needs to be on its A game. I mean, the rulebook isn't even finished at the back, where it says all the betrayal cards, but it doesn't even have this one. Oh yeah, the player aid. While it has some good parts like iconography and end of game scoring, the actual rules sections are frustratingly lacking. Summer Tribute has way too much 6-point font goob glob. Why did they go into so much detail here? It should just say exploration rewards to match the briskness of, say, undead moves. Some cards are also very unclear in their wording, so that means you have to go back and check the rulebook, which actually doesn't answer any questions regarding those cards. Like when it says max +9, does that include the sword icon beforehand? Or this card, I'm sure the strength is equal to this number total, not that you get a card back into your hand as a result. And the alignment cards need a little bit more visual help, like they do show the icons of the regions, which is cool, but why not show the outline of the places you're trying to control? That would help in a jiffy, and there's lots of space on this card. Lastly, I would just say there is off English. Like, yeah, it's just really splattered around this game, and for us native English speakers, it can kind of just get comedic at times. Draft cards, not draft cards. Or all these missed instances of plurality. It's like talking to my grandma sometimes. Like it's in every single paragraph, I kid you not. It makes sense, but it's just so frustrating to read. While we're on text, most of the text in this game is so small to the point where it makes reading other people's combat cards or relics equipped kind of a nightmare. Like there's so much dead space on these cards, at least bold the text. Oh yeah, reading relics in general is annoying when battles get big. Like it's not surprising to have half the units in the battle have a relic, and the relic isn't visible from the back, because it's meant to be a card you play secretly from your hand. You can see the relic and not the mini, or the mini and not the relic, or neither. There's not really a smooth fix here because of how it interacts with a secret loading of cards phase. So perhaps this should just be a token while on the board, but man, that would be a lot more components. Putting so many special abilities for units is just a tricky thing to deal with. We'll get back to this in gameplay cons. And yes, while this is a prototype, the pieces smell terrible out of the box, and the game is currently a nightmare to set up and clean up because all the minis go into their own unique boxes. And Vengeance tokens look way too much like the season track token, and they're vastly different things. There's only 3 Vengeance tokens ever, so important to know when you run out. And why not make the Vengeance token red like the area goes on? There also seems to be some missing touches for the faster game, the one that we played and are reviewing, which is people's first impression of this game. So that's got to be good, right? There's just no way to cover up the long game area on the board, which is a huge missed opportunity. And the player aid also shows 6 steps in summer without any line. This needs to have at least the line. Oh, while we're on the player aid, it's time to dig into this because the flavor text on the front is hilarious. They're all funky grammar and all say, his or her story unfolds. Come on, ChatGPT, I know you're trying, but calculate a little bit more, please. It's also weird that the art on the player aid is entirely folded in. Like when you're looking at the aid from the front, it just looks like text surrounded by a color, which is a huge disassociation. When you're playing the game, your play area POV is actually mostly your advisor constantly looking at you. There's nothing in the player screen facing you that shows your prints. So you feel more connected to your advisor than your prints, which is more than just a nitpick because this game is supposed to be strong in theme as you're the second born or third born child fighting other ones. Now it's time for gameplay cons. And let's start with the new Enlightenment cards, that is the emergent objectives you can get from drawing off a deck of cards. And there's just zero way to modify how you get these. Like there's no way to scry them, which doesn't seem all that bad, except that some of them can just change the game way too much. Like remember how crazy these are. Look, 50 points for someone else winning the game, or a necromancer for 44 points that you reveal during the prey phase. This can make the outcome of the game somewhat beholden to, oh yeah, even though a bunch of cool diplomacy happened and you carefully betrayed at the right moment and managed troops and cards well, some guy just had a crazy enlightenment card they revealed endgame to win the game. This is just kind of the game design, but the swinginess of this could be handled better though. Next is the balance with some cards, and I know this is a heavy negotiation game, so you can kind of balance out some card weirdness through that, but there's 3 areas we found are a bit too weird. First are the relics, where there's a 1 strength versus a 5 strength, which is an insane leap in power. Well, there are ways to play around people getting these, like spending 2 tails at the market to dump and refresh the entire relic area, or just making sure the person who needs them doesn't grab the relic there before you. It is still possible for someone to luck sack their way into 5 strength, which feels like it should be capped at 3. Reflecting how relics are so garbage to see on the board, and you're encouraged to load them up on small guys, which makes calculating power unintuitive, why not either take relics out of the game, or have them at a greatly reduced roll and just have them only equipable to your prince. After all, you'd still be able to freely change out the relic on the prince during combat, and having more relics in hand would give you more hand management. The next type of card are some of these techniques that you play during combat. So one is that you can get 7 damage for every 2 normal units, which while it might seem a little bit finicky to set up, 7 damage by only paying 3 chi is an insane swing. Okay, sure, your opponent could technically remove the troops before you damage calculate, but this card is just still way too good. As a comparison, you normally get 5 damage by paying 5 to 6 chi. Either this needs more prerequisites and costs, or should just be maxed out at 6 damage per pair. Then there's the super OP cards that have this icon in them. Well, if you know they're OP, you can just take them out of the game, so that's cool. But the rulebook should have clarified that, and it should probably be an optional variant rather than being bundled in. Then we got the betray mechanic. So it's really odd how you could betray your teammates, and then they can betray afterwards, and then suddenly you're on the same team again. What? Like, I'm not even kidding, because you can play betrayal even if you don't have an alliance. So if you get betrayed, you can just go back to being on the same color as them. So if you want to get out of this toxic relationship and you betray them to get out, well, they just go back to being with you in a different color. So yeah, looks like you're not fighting anymore. Yeah, I guess we're back together. This should just not be possible, and also it's just unintuitive. Just have the same team not be able to be reformed in 1 year. Next on betrayal is that it sometimes doesn't feel rewarding enough for how cool it does sound in practice. And that's because the betrayal cards are so widely varied in strength and outcome that they're really tricky to play around. Like, one betrayal has -1 VP as a cost, and then the most common one has -7 VP for playing it. Well, you tell me, which person is more likely to betray? -1 should probably be -3 or 4, because you're probably getting 4 VP plus for winning the fight. And the best betrayal card is the one that lets you move not your alliance spot, but someone else's. Now that is so good because you don't have to go down in any VP. Actually, no, hold on, I think this one's the best one. Steal someone's relic. This is easily a 6 to 8 strength swing in a combat, and it doesn't neg you any victory points. But yeah, these 2 betray cards have the right idea to do more than just kill another unit, so there maybe could be more betray cards in this mantra, like moving undead or stealing resources. It would be cool if you also had a way to know which betrayal cards people had before they were played, if they're gonna be so swingy. Like, it's great to play around someone having a -7 betrayal card because you're not sure if he's gonna be able to bite the bullet to actually betray, or not. The more you can reward players for having high game knowledge, the better. Lastly, for gameplay cons is this year marker all the way over here, where as you progress the game and go to the final year, you flip it over, and this could lead to all sorts of things. It can give no spring harvest, to a free undead phase that happens right away, or everyone's advisor just dies and everyone just gets new ones. There should at least be a variant to see what this is before it happens, so people don't feel like the rug was just pulled under them in the final year, which is the most important year. Okay, I lied, actually, there's one more gameplay con, but it's also mixed in heavily with the thematic con. So this is how the zombie spawn happens. We're told that the zombies come from the north, Zoo, the very northern desolate area. Okay, that makes sense. But then you just roll a d12 to spawn zombies, and it can spawn anywhere on the map then, including directly in the south. This means that you can technically have 2 zombie spawns in the same region, which isn't incredibly unlikely because you can roll up to 4 times in 1 round. Well, 2 zombie spawns on you can really ruin your plans. That made us think, okay, sure, we get it. We know why zombies just don't only spawn in the north, because there wants to be at least some threat for them to spawn in the south to put pressure on the bad ending. So maybe there could be some portal in the north that players have control over, which if the zombies go through this portal, then they could spawn in the south. So then you would have zombies spawn in the north most of the time in one of these 3 regions, and then that would really cut down on the amount of dice rolling you have to do too, because that can get kind of repetitive. It would also let you take out or change this necromancy track of how when you get less ruins, you roll more dice, which is unintuitive and odd. Like, why are there double the amount of zombies spawning if there's 0 ruins where the evil is? Scoring! Now it's time for a tentative score on Realm of Sword and Snow, where we try to critically evaluate the aforementioned pros and cons with the caveat of whether or not this is even a good idea in the first place. And this is a long, heavyweight area control with plenty of Ameritrash ideas, with heavy negotiations to round it all out, with a neutral undead faction that makes you play semi-co-op sometimes. Sounds like a great idea to me, and the design team said this will run about $120 to $150 USD, where the minis are going to look different in every single color. But that's in the future. Let's give a score right now, and this prototype is going to be a 7 out of 10. It is tentatively good. As we were saying in the overview, man, this game is crazy! Like when you hear that a game plays over years and that there's only 2 years, you might think, okay, well, that's not too long, right? Especially if you're playing the shortened version. Each year is a long endeavor that just meshes together well to have a climactic resolution, and you get that twice with the fast game. Realm of Sword and Snow feels like the designers played a lot more serious area controls, then played some wacky Ameritrash games and went, yeah, let's just put them all together to try to get the best moments from both. With the neutral faction, of course. And then the stuff just kind of kept getting piled on, like, hey, let's add relics in addition to all the combat cards. Or let's have you explore for more win conditions. Or let's give all these ways to give points by killing zombies. Then because the game has 3 meaty latter parts of a year, each part becomes a little bit more convoluted, like how scoring changes with every phase. Other times things are clear hotfixes, like how you can use the Shong exploration to somehow gain morale, or move a guy into another region. Why? Just cuz. Or how you can only trade with the bank if you go to one specific region. Otherwise, that symbol does nothing. Or just relics. Do they really need to exist in this game? Well, they do if you like how much more replayability they can add, but they make the game stay a lot more complicated in an already complicated game. Essentially, there's a ton of stuff just crammed into this game to make the 2 to 3 year round structure actually work. It can be an epic time, even for just 3 players. Like if we were to boil down this game, it's that it can be really, really gamey despite the theme. Sometimes the mechanics and theme just mesh together perfectly. See skills with chi, season progression, the soul gems, the morality track, exploring relics and skills in their special regions like a library, or exploring zoo to get a new Ameritrashy feeling mission. These are all cool to have a big sense of what could happen in ancient fictional China this time. Then there's the issue of time length. So I'm sure the designers realized, okay, we're gonna have like 3 years minimum to try to balance all these factors in with the negotiation possibilities. So we'll call that the standard game. Oh shoot, wait, hold on. This game is really, really long. Let's just make that 2 years. Oh shoot, that's still too long. Let's cut down some of the summer phase then. Like our 4-player game was about 4 hours for the fast game, with the game drastically slowing down in the final year, because players' hands get more complex with no hand limit, relics get more widespread, and there's just more points to evaluate. So then we wouldn't be surprised if this game hits 6 to 7 hours for a 3-year standard game. But funnily enough, Realm of Sword and Snow isn't hurt too much by this self-abridging because it's inherently so RNG heavy with all sorts of outcome, with constant negotiation possibilities and backstabbing, and it just isn't meant to be perfectly balanced. Okay, mind you that the systems are grounded enough so it doesn't feel like turns are just a dice roll. Like fighting other players is not RNG, but the fact that emergent alignment cards can straight up switch your team should really set your expectations. But remember, tons of negotiation. Despite these huge hurdles and unintuitiveness, currently frustrating rules, and some RNG that is too wacky, this game could absolutely be brilliant for you. If you have the time and you love area controls with some eccentricity, take a look. You can have a ton of great moments with thematic betrayals, rallying the undead after you hilariously convert your army into them and you're now a zombie lord, or you can even just find the perfect card combo to abuse. Realm of Sword and Snow really is this lumbering yet memorable playground to have all sorts of heroic team moments against undead before you inevitably be a scumbag to your siblings in some way. It's also heavily replayable, so you can keep playing it weekly and get to about 2.5 hours with 3 players. One aspect that really sealed the deal of how darn player dependent and how your meta can evolve over time is the bad outcome. After both our plays, our group was thinking, yeah, this game is pretty much gonna get the bad ending every game because spending gemstones is just way too good to pass up. Then the designer told us that only 3 out of 25 of their games have been bad endings. So whoops, I guess we're just scummy and greedy. Okay, last thing, can we just not call this game Realm of Sword and Snow? It just doesn't really roll off the tongue well. Just call it Sword and Snow.
Hi everyone, I'm Alexander, I'm the KDM guy. I tend to like games that have a lot of strategy, big strategy games, and I also like games that have asymmetry. I prefer ones that have asymmetry up front, but I also like games that develop asymmetry over time through upgrades or things like that. So I thought going into Sword and Snow, I would actually really enjoy it. So I would rate Realm of Sword and Snow a 5 out of 10. I think it's average, but I don't think it's middle of the road. It is a game that produces ambivalent feelings in me. Sometimes I really like it, and sometimes I really don't. I think Realm of Sword and Snow has an immense amount of potential, and it has some genuinely standout moments, but it is very mired in complexity bloat and frustrating design choices. Sometimes the game delivers moments that are easily a 7 out of 10, sometimes even an 8 or a 9, rarely, that are very memorable and enjoyable. But I think more commonly with 4 players, you're looking at a game that is going to have very long turn times and a lot of rules questions. What should be diplomacy turns into just bickering and empty chatter, and thus it approaches something more like a 4 or even a 3. So for the pros, I basically agree with everything that's already been mentioned in this video, but there's 2 aspects that I think are the most important for my personal score. The first thing I really like is the undead faction. I think the undead faction is very well designed for the most part, insofar as it leads to a lot of great story moments, very strong thematic moments, where sometimes the table is actively playing against each other and trying to find the way to most efficiently move undead around to mess up the other players. And other times they're all collaborating because they have to take down the undead. And more often than not, you have factions that sort of arise naturally at the table, shifting occasionally between these 2 sides. And I think the way the undead are designed helps facilitate this play pattern. And I think in this sort of big strategy game, you sort of need that dynamic shifting alliance element, and the undead are just a very engaging and memorable vehicle for delivering that sort of fun. And thus, that's a nice segue into the second thing I like, which are the Enlightenment cards. They remind me a lot of playing Battlestar Galactica, BSG, in that you end up having a hidden role, effectively, where sometimes you are just overtly working against the other players. Openly, you're the necromancer and you're moving the undead around, but sometimes you are secretly working against the other players. So for the cons, I think the game becomes nearly unplayable at 4 players. The board is crowded, overwrought with minis, and then those minis are also going to have relics attached to them, so you're going to be constantly standing up and you're going to have to pick up each relic and you're going to have to inspect it, which is sometimes annoying because the relics aren't always facing you and sometimes the minis are turned in different ways. Every single battle, pick up each relic and read them, and then you're going to have to calculate the strength value of every single person in the battle, and you're also going to have to consider, well, who's going to betray me? Maybe my alliance will shift and my strength total will change. Maybe someone is going to steal one of my relics, or maybe they're going to destroy one of my relics, so I have to think. Burned like 10 minutes doing this. Is anyone going to declare any skill cards? Check my hand, let's see what I have. And then again, we're doing the same calculation. There's so many things that bog down the battle system, and this just balloons the playtime. The last 4-player game I played, we did the first year in 1 hour, and we did the second year in 3. And so when you are perhaps like me, and you have the Enlightenment card, the loser, and you want your prince to get killed, so you're not really as invested in these battles as everyone else, it absolutely kills your enjoyment, or at least it killed my enjoyment. Even though people were producing skill cards that were wildly different in their effectiveness, I never felt like the game was actively unfair, because I always thought, well, I have the potential to draw these sorts of powerful cards. Even though the game is very unbalanced, I never felt like I was being cheated, but I do feel like the game was very tedious. Everyone has these sort of explosive nuke-style cards that are going to wildly change the battle, so why should I bother going through all these mental steps to calculate strength and consider all these different variables when in the end, it could just be all blown out by one guy playing this insane strength card. In review, I think the game has some good moments and some bad moments, but I'm not convinced that the various mechanisms actually lead to a fun game. If you are a fan of area control or diplomacy style games, I think you could definitely get a lot of enjoyment out of this, especially if the theme speaks to you. For me, the lows, the cons, they prevented this game from being consistently enjoyable.
My personal score for the Realm of Sword and Snow, or as I like to call it, Sword and Snow, is going to be a 7 out of 10. I have a good time with it. Yep, I am genuinely surprised. Even though I like the theme, After reading of how convoluted the rules are and how long this game is, I really thought this would be a 5 or 6 at max for me. I usually just tend to shy away from longer games because I just don't think they're worth the time and would rather play my longer proven games if I'm gonna spend that much to play a game like Civ or TI4. Anyways, I would describe my experience with this game as either a 9 out of 10 with hype moments or a 4 out of 10 with a lot of sluggishness. And then I just could not stop thinking about all the cool and or funny plays you can do in this game. And yeah, it definitely could not be lower than a 7 out of 10. I would definitely be down to play it again as a long game, which I'm usually very picky about. So, excellent. Yes, I like the world they constructed. It's just close enough to Game of Thrones and OG Chinese world that I'm pretty immersed on what's happening. And I can imagine the strife for the capital, which I just renamed King's Landing in China. The zombies definitely feel like a real threat that are just scaling, which keeps me interested in their development. Oh yes, the zombies are freaking awesome. I've always been a fan of semi-co-op elements in games, like Game of Thrones 2nd Edition, where the raiders I just felt like were pansies and I wanted more destruction out of them. And I believe that Sword and Snow does zombies actually the best out of any board game I played. They are slow and lumbering, you get rewarded for finding them enough, yet when enough stack, especially around their cool leaders, they can cause some real snowballing and turn the game. And then you can burn them to the ground if you're invested into those combat cards if you'd like. For gameplay, one of my favorites besides handling the undead is actually the combat system. And it's what I wanted out of Rising Sun. An area control where it's fun to betray others, where the map is constantly having units move is a great idea to me. You have these pivotal moments with revealing cards and revealing strength, and you can betray if you want. But I hated Rising Sun's bidding system, and the units explicitly sacrificing themselves was such a buzzkill. That doesn't really happen in Sword and Snow because you can't straight up sacrifice as an action, and the combat still has to happen, or you could run away, and the card play is so much more grounded that I can actually keep track of me winning combat instead of money just flying around in Rising Sun. I combined this with all the different types of cards, how the undead can operate differently every game, with an area control core, and every year feeling climactic. Heck yeah, I'm usually very engaged on what's going on and standing up. I kind of just want to do things in this game, like try building cities more, or try exploring more, or camping in the capital. There's just so much room for experimentation. This just wraps up for a memorable couple hours where I'm constantly interacting with my friends, which is what I want from a board game. Okay, and then one final time on the theme. I like it. I don't identify as the most Chinese-leaning person in the world, but it's nice to return to this world with the Three Kingdoms in a game that isn't just cards like Sangguosha. Now, if only the art on cards were bigger and didn't feel so uncanny, it would be a little bit more pleasant. Like, come on, like, let's not be stretched in a machine here and actually look more human. Come on, please. Okay, so now for the frustrating parts. One is definitely rules. Gosh, the amount of times this tension in this game got undercut by rules questions and hiccups was annoying, especially when the same questions got brought up again and again by different people, because yeah, it's just that confusing. Actually, I wanted to highlight the betray mechanic. I find it very odd that you can play the betray card even when you're not allied. I mean, Rising Sun kind of did that as well, but it's just a pet peeve of mine when you're doing that in a game. Haha, I betrayed no one. The second and more critically frustrating part is the downtime, and this is amplified by rules confusion. But man, does this game invite analysis paralysis just because of how convoluted game states can get during combat, and how winter is so reliant on autumn outcomes. This was worse in 4 players, where if you're not part of combat, well, you're just sitting there not doing much. Yet you can't completely just go to the bathroom or something, because during the next fight, you may be asked to reinforce. And that's pretty much it. It just leaves me with a game where I'm frequently excited to plan my next move and see what others are doing, and I'm constantly standing up and looking. And then the bleh moments, I'm just checking my phone, or, you know, checking if anyone needs water, or just going to the toilet, or whatever. It's just, there is downtime. I don't personally mind the randomness too much, because I think it's controlled enough for a game that I'm not taking too seriously about the outcome anyways. I mean, come on. Zombies, right? It's more of a playground for me to do cool things in and to be in this universe with friends. Yet it's ironically in-depth enough that yeah, technically you could write strategy guides. Honestly, I was considering giving this a shelf-side certified label just because of how interesting it is and how it just did this area control Ameritrash thing for me, but considering how it's not done yet, I'm just gonna reserve that application. But yeah, this is memorable for sure. I would play this game any day over Rising Sun. And my friend who also disliked Rising Sun gave this game, Sword and Snow, an 8 out of 10. I don't know if it hit 8 out of 10 for me, but I'm very comfortable having it at a 7. That was our review of Realm of Sword and Snow. Yeah, not sure when this game is exactly coming out, but glad to make this review. This being sent to us to not affect scoring. And as always, thank you to our patrons for making videos like this possible. This one was a big one. Oh my goodness. I can't imagine how long they spent making this and testing it. But yeah. Anyways, thank you to our patrons. We got coffee if you want to support us through that. And also, we got our Mad Lads cardboard over here. Anyways, yeah. Hope to see you guys soon. That's it. Bye-bye. Bye-bye for now. Oh, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think about this game, how it compares to your favorite area controls like Blood Rage, Inish, maybe even Twilight Imperium, Rising Sun if you like it, you're crazy, maybe Root. Yeah. Anyways, see you guys down below.